Hello, welcome to the second edition of our conversation with the Director of Communications of the Bank of Ghana, Bernard Otabil. Last week, we spoke to him about issues to do with the microfinance industry. We didn't finish a conversation. We're continuing today, and it will just be as exciting as that of the first one. Don't go away. At now some of the microfinance companies that have gone under. People say that the central bank steps in a little bit too late. In the case of DKM, we just realized from the statement published by, I believe, the Registrar General's Department that as of last year, the liability alone was over 200 million cedis. At what time must the Bank of Ghana step in to stop the issue from blowing up in our faces?
In the banking supervision scheme of things, these are some of the issues that you would expect the bank to be able to bring to the fore. And if you look at the whole DKM issue, the Bank of Ghana was very much in it. They were spoken to, they were guided, and at various points, the bank raised a red flag, over the activities of that particular microfinance institution. But Vivian, as you very much know, the DKM issue is now going through another cycle, and under the Insolvency Act is being dealt with. The liquidator has been appointed, and the assets will be liquidated, and whatever will happen, in terms of the depositors' funds and so on and so forth, we'll get to know after the liquidator has finished the work under the Insolvency Act that we very much know of. But clearly the Bank of Ghana has taken a lot of steps in this regard. And if you look at the recent Depositors Protection Bill that was introduced in Parliament, it's just a way of also showing that the little depositors or the depositors whose funds do not exceed a certain threshold will be able to get some level of insurance cover in the scheme of things. I mean, this is a scheme that has been introduced in a number of countries. And even though you wouldn't really say that, well, I'm getting the full, I'm going to be indemnified for everything that I have, put into that particular scheme.
If you look at the figures we see, 30,000, 40,000, 100,000 microfinance companies, and then in the end you get 1,000 cedis, really?
Vivian, the issue here, as I mentioned, earlier, is that it is not the case that the microfinance institutions have been left on their own to do whatever they like. There are strict reporting system in place that ensures that all these early signs or the early warnings are seriously addressed before it's dovetails into something else or create that kind of wider problems for the general public. But significantly, if you look at the number of customers that we have, as bank customers, and the level of transformation that have taken place within the financial system, to the extent that today we have a tier system in terms of the licensing issue, you would realize that we have very, very satisfied customers and people who are very, very happy with the financial system of the country. And just to take you back, just a few days back, the CEO of Beige Capital also made mention of something to do with the microfinance sector and really praised the BOG for what it has done over the years to ensure that the credibility of the sector is very much protected. And if what I read from the from him is something to go by, then of course there is some level of satisfaction even among the industry players. And with this sort of peer review from someone who is actually in the thick of it and really doing what is expected of an institution within the savings and loans category, I'm quite satisfied. And I'm also satisfied on the basis of the fact that the bank has put in all the necessary systems to ensure that we continue to protect the industry and promote the financial stability that is so necessary for the economic growth that we all so much desire for this particular country.
What do you say to DKM customers? Most of them say it's obvious they are not going to get their money back. For example, even if you look at what is happening with the liquidation, you're a finance person. If you look at the waterfall rule, by the time it gets down to the bottom, there'll be nothing left. I mean, look into the camera and tell the DKM customers what they should expect. Are you confident the issue will be dealt with and they will at least get a portion of their monies back?
My confidence lies in the fact that there is a law, that actually governs issues of this nature. The Insolvency Act talks about what a liquidator is expected to do. The customers have been very, patient with whatever the liquidators are doing, and I'm not really privy to what stage of asset assessment that they've got into and how it's really going to cascade down to those who are actually owed money. But, Vivian, the point is quite clear that in the scheme of corporate governance, you would find a situation whereby ordinary shareholders will become maybe the last to be paid in situations of this nature. They are not shareholders anyway, I'm just giving an example. Then you may also have, debt holders or bond holders, and then also preference shares who will also be given preference over ordinary shareholders and so on and so forth. So there's some level of risk, as I mentioned, that comes with all these schemes within the financial world. And the laws are there in most cases to govern situations of this nature. So I would say that at this point that it's so important that we allow the Insolvency Act to work, the liquidator to do the work that he expected to do, and I believe that when their work is done, they'll be able to come out with a proper assessment and as to how the customers are going to get paid in that regard. Okay,
your final question, and I'll let you go. With regards to fan clubs in the country, a lot of people are going into the fan clubs expecting to do investments, etc. As a regulator of the microfinance industry and then everything to do with money, do you think it's a good idea or it's right for people to be going into such clubs to be making all these microfinance, not knowing what they're doing? What would be your advice for them?
Yes, the assessment of a given situation of this nature, as you've really put it out there, I would rather put it in a different context. That if the activities of those who run these so-called fan clubs, are to become a universally applicable principle, that we should all go out there and collect people's money under the guise of providing some kind of fan club or networking activity, only for us to collect the money and run off. How are we going to be able to live in this world? Not only in Ghana. I believe that there is the need for us to differentiate between what is fraudulent and what is purely a regulatory lapse. Now, fraudsters are fraudsters, they are all over. When accounting first started, records have it that all the rules of accounting could be written on an A4 size paper and pinned on the wall. You could actually go there and read the do's and don'ts. Now, today's accounting regulations runs into several pages, right, with exposure drafts, white papers, and so on and so forth. Sadly, this is also the era that we have the highest level of accounting scandals. You can talk of the Enrons of the day, you can talk of Parmalat, you can talk of Tygo, you can talk of Peregrine, WorldCom, Arthur Anderson, several of these institutions. So would you say that because of the fact that these people have really abused the accounting system and therefore accounting is not necessary? We can't say that. It is only the case that no matter what you do, there are people who will try to circumvent the situations and create all kinds of uncomfortable, issues around it all. Now, two senators in the US, Sabans and Oxley, one in the upper chamber, one in the lower chamber, realizing that, look, we can't sit down with all the rules and regulations governing this particular industry for people to still be getting themselves involved in all these sort of financial scandals, supported and promoted what later becomes SOX, the Sabans-Oxley Act, which now became, a criminal offense. That if you knowingly, paraphrase, falsify accounting information to the extent that people rely on that information so provided, and eventually it turns out that indeed you misled people, you could summarily, be subject to a term of imprisonment or a fine or both. It gets to a point that society will have to get involved. These two senators were not regulators. They were not part of any system that was supposed to check the activities of these financial institutions. But it's gone and on and on and on. And at what point should that stop? So until we get to the point where we criminalize some of these activities, as opposed to trying to blame it on another person.
But you can push the agenda as regulators, right? Well, in the case of this
the penalties are there. right there in the Banking Act, the kind of unit points that apply, when you are actually in breach of the Banking Act. It's clear. We have it all there. But what I'm saying is that beyond the law is ethics. In ethics, the law is the minimum. So what I mentioned earlier, if you look at the principle of the categorical imperative test, that is, if anything that I do, should it become a universal principle, do I think it will become the best principle for everyone to apply? For instance, thou shalt not steal, right? Thou shalt not even borrow money when you know so well that you are not going to be able to pay back. Now, what does it mean? When you pay money and you don't pay back, what you do, you actually denying others who have the genuine need for that money and probably in the position to pay back access to that money. That is not all. It also increases the cost of borrowing for all of us. Because when someone is borrowing and the person is not paying back, right, it means that in the next assessment of a loan product, in terms of pricing of a loan product, the bank is going to put into consideration all the non-performing loans in terms of taking an average view and say that, look, because of that, my pricing will have to go up in order to cover for those who potentially will not pay. Vivian, this is the problem that we have. We need that level of ethics that would guide our financial activities so that we'll promote the interest for the common good as opposed to what some people are really doing. And I would say it is the case of greed that has morphed into selfishness.
We say thank you very much to the spokesperson for the Bank of Ghana, the regulator of the banking and financial industry here in Ghana, Bernard Otabil, for joining us today in this edition of Business Today. My name is Vivian Kai Lokko. We'll leave it here and we'll see you again next time. Goodbye.